shatter everything I believed about my family. My name is Margaret Harlow, though everyone calls me Maggie. I am 68 years old, a widow, and for the past 5 years I have lived alone in the house my late husband Edward built with his own hands. Every Tuesday morning my daughter-in-law Isabel comes over for breakfast. It has been our little tradition since Edward passed away. She says she wants to keep me company, to make sure I do not get too lonely in this big wooden house surrounded by pines and silence. I always appreciated her kindness, or at least I thought I did. That morning, the air smelled of coffee and maple pancakes. Isabel looked perfect as always, hair styled, lipstick flawless, clothes so elegant that even a simple breakfast felt like an occasion. When she left to run some errands, she waved from the porch and said she would see me later that evening. I smiled, waved back, and began cleaning the kitchen. That was when I heard it. A faint buzz from the hallway table. Her phone. Pun. At first I ignored it. I have never been the type to pry. But when it buzzed again, the screen lit up. I glanced over just to see if it might be something urgent. The name on the screen froze me in place. Edward. My husband's smiling face stared back at me. The same man who had been buried 5 years ago. The message below his photo read, Thursday same time. Can't wait to see you again. For a moment the world tilted. The air left my lungs. I whispered his name like a prayer I no longer believed in. My hands trembled as I reached for the phone. The room seemed to shrink around me, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. Edward's name, his picture, a new message. From the grave. I should have left it alone. I should have placed the phone back where it was and pretended I never saw it. But something stronger than fear took over me. A desperate, burning need to understand. And that was the moment everything began to fall apart. I told myself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe Isabel had saved some old texts from Edward. Maybe the number still belonged to someone else. My mind searched for any reason that made sense. But as I unlocked her phone, what I saw erased every comforting thought. There were dozens of messages, not old ones, new ones, the first from just 3 days ago. Each message was signed with the letter E. I scrolled slowly, my breath catching at every line. See you soon, darling, I miss the way you laugh. Thursday the lake, same time, same place. And then one that made my stomach twist. You always look beautiful when you wear the blue dress. The blue dress. I remembered it. Isabel had worn it at our family dinner last month. She said it was new. Edward used to love that color on me. The more I read, the more my hands shook. The texts went back months, all the way to the early summer. Photos were attached. Some of them showed Isabel at a small wooden cabin by a lake. I recognized the pine trees, the shape of the porch, the rusty mailbox. It was the same cabin Edward had owned years ago, the one he claimed to have sold before his heart attack. My pulse quickened as I tapped through the photos. One of them showed a man's arm reaching around Isabel's waist. His hand wore a gold wedding band identical to Edward's. Another showed a shadowed reflection in a window, broad shoulders, gray hair, familiar posture. No matter how much I told myself it could not be him, every detail screamed otherwise. For a few minutes I sat frozen on the couch, the phone still warm in my hands. I wanted to cry but could not. My thoughts spun between disbelief and horror. Could Edward have faked his own death? Had Isabel been part of it? I was everything I had mourned, every tear I had shed, just a performance. I stared at his photo on the screen, the same one from our wedding day that I had placed in his coffin. The same smile, the same eyes. I whispered aloud, "If you were out there, Edward, why would you do this to me?" Outside, the wind rose through the pines, brushing against the house like a whisper from the past. I knew there was only one way to get answers. I had to find that cabin. And deep down, I already feared what I might find there. The next morning I went down to the basement where Edward's old documents were stored. Boxes full of yellowed papers, receipts, and photographs filled the shelves. Dust floated through the sunlight, making the room feel like a forgotten museum of our life together. I found the box marked property records. My hands trembled as I opened it. There, folded neatly inside a plastic sleeve, was the deed to the Silver Pine Lake cabin, still in Edward's name. He had never sold it. He had lied. For a long while I just stood there staring at the paper. Then something inside me hardened. I grabbed my car keys, wrapped my coat around my shoulders, and drove. The road to Silver Pine wound through tall pines and patches of early snow. It was the same road Edward and I had taken on our anniversaries, long before the heart attack that stole him from me. My chest tightened as I turned onto the gravel path that led to the cabin. When I reached it, everything looked exactly as I remembered, except it was clean. Fresh firewood stacked neatly by the door, curtains drawn, the faint smell of smoke still in the air. Someone had been here recently. I hesitated at the porch, listening. Only the wind and the rustle of trees answered. I pushed the door open. Inside, the cabin looked lived in. 2 glasses sat on the table, half full of red wine. A blue scarf Isabel's was draped over the chair, and hanging by the fireplace was a man's denim jacket I could have sworn belonged to Edward. I touched the fabric, my fingers trembling. It was still warm, as if someone had just worn it. Then I saw the photographs pinned to the corkboard above the desk. Isabel smiling beside a man whose face was turned away. In one of them, I caught a glimpse of his reflection in a mirror, the same silver hair, the same jawline, the same profile as my husband. I stepped back, my heart pounding. A floorboard creaked outside the cabin. Through the window, I saw the faint shadow of a figure moving between the trees. I didn't wait to see who it was. I ran to my car, my breath coming in sharp gasps, and sped down the dirt road. That night, as I sat in the darkness of my living room, one thought repeated in my head like a curse. If Edward was dead, then who was living in that cabin? Sleep never came that night. I sat by the window watching the first snowflakes fall, my mind looping through the same impossible questions. Every creak in the house made me flinch. Every sound of the wind felt like footsteps coming closer. By morning, I decided to do what I had always done when I was lost: go to someone who might have answers. I drove into town to see Sheriff Richard Owens, a man who had known Edward since college. He greeted me with a kind smile, but I could tell he sensed something was wrong. "Richard," I said, keeping my voice steady, "what would you say if I told you someone might have faked their own death?" He frowned, leaning back in his chair. "That's a heavy accusation, Maggie. People don't just fake their deaths. Not without help. Why do you ask?" I forced a smile and shrugged, just curious, something I read. He gave me a look that said he didn't believe me but chose not to press. Before I left, he added quietly, "If you think someone's been lying to you, be careful how deep you dig. You might not like what you find." His words stayed with me the whole drive home. That evening, I pulled out the small security camera my son had installed years ago after a break-in. I drove back to the lake under cover of darkness and placed it in the rafters of the cabin, angled toward the front door. The next night, I watched the feed on my laptop. For hours, nothing happened. Then, just before sunset, the door opened. Isabel stepped inside wearing that same blue dress from the photos. A few minutes later, a man followed her in. The camera caught only his profile: silver hair, strong build, the same smile I had kissed for 40 years. I clapped my hand over my mouth, tears burning my eyes. It was him, or someone who looked exactly like him. My husband, my Edward. Alive, or something worse. I didn't remember how I got there. One moment I was staring at the video in disbelief. The next, I was already driving towards Silverpine Lake. My mind screamed at me to stop, but my hands kept gripping the steering wheel tighter, my foot pressed harder on the gas. The cabin appeared through the mist like a ghost from the past. Light poured through the windows. 2 shadows moved inside Isabel, and the man who wore my husband's face. I stepped out of the car, every nerve in my body alive. The cold air bit my skin, but I barely felt it. I walked up to the door, my heart pounding so loudly I thought they might hear it. I knocked once hard. The door opened. He stood there. For a moment, neither of us breathed. The man's eyes widened, shock flickering across his face. He looked just like Edward, same silver hair, same familiar scent of cedar and tobacco, but there was something different in his posture, something heavier in his gaze. "Maggie," he whispered, as if testing the name. My voice shook. "Who are you?" He hesitated, then stepped back, motioning for me to come in. "You'd better sit down. There's a lot you don't know." I didn't move, I could barely stand. Isabel appeared behind him, her face drained of color. "Tell me," I demanded. "Right now." He sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "My name is Richard Harlow, Edward's twin brother." The words hit me like a blow. "Twin brother?" He nodded. "We were separated at birth, adopted by different families. Edward found me a few years ago when he needed a bone marrow transplant. We kept in touch after that. He told me about you, about Thomas, about his life. Then, when he started having problems at home, he came to me." "Problems?" I spat the word out. He looked away. Isabel's eyes filled with tears. "He said he felt trapped," Richard continued. "He wanted to start over, away from everyone. Isabel," he glanced at her, "she was part of that plan. They were going to leave together. But before they could, Edward had a heart attack at the cabin. Isabel panicked. She called me. I helped clean things up." My knees gave out. I fell into a chair, the world spinning around me. "So you let me bury an empty coffin? You both let me mourn a lie?" Richard's voice cracked. "I never meant to hurt you. Isabel and we didn't plan to fall in love afterward. It just happened." I stared at them, two faces of betrayal. My chest ached with something beyond anger, beyond grief. For the first time, I realized revenge might not mean destroying them. It might mean letting them live with the weight of what they'd done. But in that moment, all I could do was whisper the truth that had broken me. "You both killed him, just in different ways." I drove home in silence, the road winding through the forest like a scar. I don't remember crying, though my sleeves were damp when I reached the house. I sat by the fireplace until dawn, staring at the flames and listening to the storm outside. The betrayal was too large to fit inside my mind. It was a weight pressing against my chest, threatening to crush me. For days I barely moved. My son Thomas called several times, asking if I was all right. I told him I had caught a cold. How could I explain that the truth was what was making me sick? One evening, as I reheated the same untouched soup for the third time, I caught sight of my reflection in the kitchen window. I looked older, smaller, like the years had folded me in half. Something inside me snapped into focus. I realized I could either let this secret destroy me or I could decide what to do with it. I opened my drawer, pulled out a small bottle of sleeping pills, and for one terrifying moment, I considered ending it. Then another thought surfaced, clearer, colder. I did not need to die for what they had done. They needed to live with it. So I made a plan. The next Sunday, I called Isabel and invited her to dinner. She came, nervous but composed, wearing that same blue dress. The table was set with Edward's old china, candles flickering between us. I poured her a glass of wine and waited until she took a sip before I spoke. "I know everything," I said quietly. "The cabin. The messages. Richard." Her hand froze midair. The color drained from her face. "You will tell Thomas you want a divorce," I continued, my tone calm and steady. "You will end things peacefully. If you try to hurt him or my grandson in any way, I will destroy both you and Richard. Do you understand me?" She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. I leaned back, my heartbeat finally slowing. "Good. Then we can both move on." That night, when she left, I stood at the window and watched her car disappear down the dark road. For the first time in months, I felt something close to peace, not joy, not victory, but control. Within 2 weeks, Isabel filed for divorce. The papers arrived quietly, with no drama, no accusations. She told Thomas that she needed to find herself, that the years of grief had changed her. He believed her. Maybe he wanted to. He had loved her for so long that even her lies sounded gentle when she spoke them. The divorce went through smoothly. Isabel moved to Oregon, claiming she had found a teaching job there. Thomas stayed in Colorado with Eli, our grandson, who was 14 and too busy with basketball practice to notice how the house had grown quieter. At first, Thomas struggled. He worked long hours at the auto shop, trying to fill the silence with noise. I cooked dinner for them most nights, pretending everything was normal. Little by little, life began to take shape again. One afternoon, Thomas came home with a shy smile. "There's someone I want you to meet," he said. "Her name's Sophie. She's Eli's science teacher." When Sophie walked in, she carried warmth like sunlight. She wasn't glamorous like Isabel, but she was kind. The kind that listened more than she spoke. Watching Thomas with her felt like watching someone learn how to breathe again. Months passed. Eli's laughter filled the house again. Sophie joined us for dinners, holidays, and before long she and Thomas started planning a future together. For the first time since Edward's death, there was joy without guilt. Then, one spring morning, a letter arrived in the mail. The handwriting was delicate, familiar. "Isabel." I hesitated before opening it. The note inside was short. "Maggie. I thought you should know that Eli met Richard last week. He doesn't notice the resemblance. Thank you for keeping the secret. Isabel." I stared at the words until they blurred. There was no apology, No remorse, just quiet acknowledgement of the silence we both maintained. I walked outside, the wind cool against my face, and struck a match. The paper curled, blackened, and turned to ash in my hands. I whispered into the smoke, "Some things are better burned than remembered." For the first time I felt the past losing its hold on me. Maybe revenge didn't always come with fire or fury. Sometimes it came with letting go. 3 years passed. Life had settled into something soft and steady. Thomas and Sophie were married now, and Eli was heading off to college. The house felt lighter, filled with laughter again. I had begun to believe the past had finally gone quiet. Until one afternoon in June. We were celebrating Eli's 18th birthday at a small lakeside restaurant. The music played softly, candles glowed on the tables, and I could almost pretend that everything was simple again. Then I saw her. Isabel, standing at the entrance holding a gift bag, and beside her was a man tall, silver-haired, with familiar eyes and a faint scar above his brow. Richard. For a second the room disappeared. My chest tightened. Sophie turned to me, whispering, "Do you know them?" I forced a smile. "Yes, that's Isabel, Ellie's mother, and her friend." They walked over. Isabel's smile trembled as she greeted everyone, carefully avoiding my gaze. Richard extended his hand to Thomas. "Richard Lane," he said smoothly. "Nice to finally meet the family." Thomas shook his hand without hesitation. "You look a lot like my father," he joked, half laughing. I felt the air leave my lungs. Isabel's fingers tightened around her glass. Richard chuckled softly, his eyes flicking to mine for just a second. "Maybe just the gray hair," he said. The night went on, polite and calm, but beneath the laughter, a quiet current hummed. We all played our parts, pretending not to notice what lingered in the air, the ghost of a truth too dangerous to name. When the evening ended, Richard helped Isabel with her coat. As they turned to leave, he met my eyes once more and nodded slightly, a silent promise that the secret would stay buried. And I nodded back. Because sometimes peace isn't built on truth, it's built on silence. That night, after the restaurant lights faded and the laughter of my family turned into quiet memories, I sat alone on my porch beneath the Colorado stars. The air smelled of pine and rain. The lake shimmered in the distance, still and dark, holding the reflections of everything we chose not to say. I thought about Edward, the man I had loved, the lies he left behind, the family I had held together with silence. I thought about Isabel, trapped in her own guilt, and Richard wearing my husband's face but carrying a stranger's heart. There was a time when I wanted revenge, when I imagined destroying them the way they had destroyed my trust. But sitting there under that wide, endless sky, I realized that revenge had already happened in its own quiet way. They had to live every day knowing what they'd done, while I had found peace. Forgiveness was too big a word for what I felt. It wasn't forgiveness, not really. It was survival. It was reclaiming the parts of myself that betrayal had tried to steal: my dignity, my calm, my voice. I had survived love, loss, and deception. I had learned that peace doesn't always come from truth. Sometimes, it comes from choosing which truths deserve to live. As the night grew colder, I whispered to the stars, "You didn't win, Edward. None of you did. I did." And maybe, in that moment, the wind carried my words across the lake, past the trees, and into the quiet cabin that still held our ghosts. Because sometimes revenge isn't about hurting others. It's about refusing to let them break you. If this story touched you, share it, leave a comment, and tell me where you're watching.